Hey, it's Joe Solari, and I'm here in Mallorca with Chris Banks. How you doing, Chris?
Very well, thank you, Joe.
This is a long time coming. It's been a while since we've had a Author Nation on the road podcast, but Susan and I are traveling throughout Europe. We were just at Ricardo Fayette and Sarah's wedding, which was amazing. It was got us to make the decision to go through Europe for the whole month. We'll be ending with SPS in London, and then
Yeah, well, I'll see you there.
yeah, and it'll be fun knocking around Spain in between.
Yep.
So it's good to have you on the podcast, and let's hear a little bit about you and Pro Writing Aid and what makes a guy decide to make an editing software.
That's a very good question. And, well, ironically, it was a piece of bad luck. It was a broken ankle. Otherwise, ProWritingAid wouldn't exist. So I created ProWritingAid for myself because I was a business writer and I'd been traveling for a year and I wanted to kind of keep the magic alive. So I thought I'd write myself a magical realism book based on the kind of adventures that I'd had in South America, obviously inspired by Marquez a little bit, but it turned out I was terrible at writing fiction. So I'd had all of this experience of writing, obviously academic and then business, and I started trying to write fiction, and I had this sudden realization that I was terrible at it. So I read all of these books on how to write better fiction, all these rules that were like show, don't tell, don't use adverbs. I couldn't keep all of these things in my head, and I really struggled to see how they applied to my own writing. So I thought, well, how can I solve this problem? So I had a background in data and statistics. I studied psychology at university. So I thought maybe I can use this to help me. So I created a prototype of ProWritingAid, which looked at my writing. It was super basic. It just counted the number of different types of words. And it showed me, for example, all of the adverbs, all of the passive voice, just so that I could see where I was doing these things. And obviously, the key to improving is feedback. And the faster the feedback, the better. So for me, that was almost instantaneous feedback. You know, here you've used an adverb, maybe you should think about changing it. Here you've used passive voice, maybe you should rewrite it in the active. It had things like repeated words as well. I still use lots of the same words over and over again. As my current editor would tell you, I think he said, like, you've used allowed 15 times in this one chapter. But it gave me really good feedback really quickly. But it was purely like a passion project to support my own writing.
And this is what year?
This was 13 years ago. So I can't even do them. Like 2013. And that would probably have been it, except I then broke my ankle. And because I broke my ankle, my wife and I had planned to go and do a winter season in the Alps. And 6 weeks beforehand, I broke my ankle, so I couldn't do anything. Had like a moon boot on. She was going out every day skiing, and I was sat at home going, this kind of sucks. So I thought, well, you know, I've got this little project that I've been working on. Maybe I'll try and learn a bit more about business. Maybe I'll create a premium version of it. And I'd put it on a few writer websites, forums and stuff. And I'd got some feedback from people. So there were a few users of it online. And when I put out the premium version, I think like 15 minutes later, somebody bought it. It was like $10 or something. But I almost fell off my chair. I was like, this is unbelievable. I'm an internet millionaire. And then it's just grown from there. For me, it was a massive shift because I just realized how incredible the writing community is. The feedback that I was getting from people, the thanks, the praise that I was getting from people was like nothing that I'd ever experienced before. I think I was working in banking, writing investment research, and I found it intellectually, I found it intellectually interesting, but I didn't get much from it in terms of like a purpose. And so I was very much like, the next promotion, the next like bonus, that just didn't give me anything at all. And as soon as I started getting this feedback and interacting with the writing community and seeing the problems that they had and how passionate they were about what they were doing, and linked to the fact that I loved writing as well, I was like, this is a completely different world. And it just makes me feel so excited to be a part of it. And so I then, at that point, I was like, right, this is what I want to do. And the first year was very, very hard.
Yeah.
I think I didn't make much more sales after that first one. But gradually it started growing. And then eventually I hired a developer to help me with it, because I wasn't very good at development.
Oh, so you wrote the first.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
I mean, well, like hacked together.
Yeah.
It was like sticky back plastic and sellotape. But and there was no kind of like AI usage back then at all. It was very, very simple kind of like pattern matching. And then it's just kind of grown and evolved from there. And as the technologies have developed, we've adopted them to just give people more feedback. Because I think one of the hardest things that writers have is the lack of feedback, right? Or really long feedback loops. Right? You write something, you spend ages on it, and then you give it to somebody. Maybe you don't get feedback for another like week or month, right? By which time you've almost forgotten what you wrote, which means that it's really then hard to then apply that feedback and learn from it quickly. Whereas now we can give people almost instantaneous feedback, and they can really shorten that loop of the writing and then learning and getting feedback. For me, whatever you're doing, whether that's writing or building a business or marketing, feedback is the most important thing, right? Because
Right.
I'm sure you appreciate it, right? You can have an idea, but you don't know if it's good until you get feedback.
Well, yeah, I think that especially with authors and when you're writing your first book, right? Like you have this idea, like you have this story, and most of the people that we see that come into this space are pretty avid readers, right? So when I first came around, it was some of the most successful people were voracious readers that were like, I just decided to write the book that I was looking for. I couldn't find on the shelf, right? Just happens to be I was the market, right?
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of other people out there like me. So I think that when you do that, and it's always been a solid endeavor, and part of that is how, like what you're trying to do, right? You're pulling these things out of your imagination, but in the end, it has to be in a format that another human being can use, right?
Yeah.
Right, and that's where it gets hard, because where it makes sense for you, it follows the rules of grammar.
Yeah.
Like I think I'm a pretty smart guy and I have a lot of good ideas, and then I get them on paper and people are like, did you go to school? Like, where did you learn to write?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a really good quote that I like. There's like a different perspective is worth 80 IQ points.
Yeah.
And it's so true, right?
Yeah.
You can think that you've got the best idea in the world, and then as soon as you get a different perspective, you're like, you see all the flaws in it.
Yeah.
And you're like, but it helps you to iterate and then to get something better and better and better. So for me, that's what I wanted to do with ProWritingAid, is to give that to all writers so that they can take their ideas and they can iterate on it and improve it, so that they can share their stories with the world, and the world will connect with that story. Because again, you can have these incredible experiences, but if you can't communicate those experiences well, then people just don't get it. So there's one thing having the story, and then there's the other thing just having the ability to communicate that story in a way that connects with people emotionally as well.
Well, and I think in some respects, you having it where you can take some of that effort. It's like, okay, I can be a good storyteller. Like I can understand the mechanics of, having somebody engaged in a story. I don't maybe have the skill set or grammar or sentence
Yeah.
or the fact that I started the same sentence with I 5 times, or, the things that like the tool will pop up for you. And then, it's got that feedback loop, like you say, where after you see that, it's like, I'd like to not have the same mistakes that it's telling me about all the time. I start to fix that, right? You become a better writer using it. The thing your story is very similar to Damon Courtney and BookFunnel, and like you were a writer and you just were solving a problem for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. He had a high fantasy, wasn't it, book that he was trying to promote. And
the thing we talked about earlier was, you being isolated in that. And now we're at a point, 2026, and you guys just had your first massive community project in Nav.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in talking and maybe sharing with authors that be watching this or listening to this about how you address probably is an equally big issue in that isolation and that community, and helping people find, people like them that are dealing with the same.
Yeah. So I think for me, community is incredibly important. You made the observation earlier that writing is a solitary pastime, but actually it doesn't have to be in a large way, right? There's so many writers out there whom you can share that experience with. And I think it's interesting. I meet a lot of people who share that they're writing a book almost as if they're embarrassed about it, because I think often there's lots of writers out there, but a lot of them are kind of in the closet.
Oh yeah.
And as soon as they say, I say I'm, have a writing company, they open up to me, but the people around them don't necessarily support what they're doing. And so they feel that they almost can't discuss it, that they maybe are even stupid for wanting to pursue writing this fantasy novel set in a world with elves, whatever. And I'm always like, just go online, go on our community, you will find your people, and your life will be absolutely transformed by finding those people. Because once you find the right people to surround yourself with, it really it affirms your identity as a writer. And I think that's incredibly important, because once you feel like a writer, you write, right? It becomes your default activity. But if you feel like somebody who's like thinking about writing or trying to write or fiddling with writing, then you have to make space for that writing. For me, I feel like a writer, I try and get rid of everything else. That's my problem. It's like, how can I get rid of all of the other stuff in my life so that I can spend time writing? Whereas when I didn't see myself as a writer, it was like, how can I find like half an hour here, 20 minutes there to actually write? And so when you find people who treat you like a writer, then you start to believe that you are a writer, and then you start to act like a writer, and everything just becomes so much easier.
Yeah, I also think the other thing that comes out of the community too, and with our participation in Nav is helping people see, like, if you are, not that there's anything wrong with doing it as a hobby, and or you just want to write a memoir, whatever it might be that is that thing, that's great. But if you're thinking like, I want to give this a shot and see if it could be something full time or earn, sell more than one book, is finding the people that can get you through so many of those obstacles, right? And in the case of ProWritingAid, sometimes if you're like me, it's like, I need this tool so I can get this thing so that it's ready to hand off to an editor.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even, if I just had my first draft, not only would it cost me a fortune, because there would be a lot of, but also you lose their capacity to be an expert when they're worrying about the mundane.
Yeah.
So I think there's, so much that when you do get into that community that's about just getting up to speed faster, right? Like whether, you know, it's funny when you run into somebody that is new and it's like, oh no, you don't have to figure that out yourself. Yeah. There's this and there's that. Anyhow, so that was 2013.
Yep.
A lot of things have changed.
Yes. Very different world now.
Yeah. So with the advent of AI and all the things that are going on with it, what's kind of your take? How has it changed your tools and your business? And I'm interested in hearing from your perspective.
I think for me, obviously, the world has gone a bit crazy in many ways, and so there's a lot of uncertainty going on, but there's also a huge amount of opportunity. And I think the ways that we're able to help writers now has just exploded. Mm-hmm. The things that we can think about in terms of like the personalization. So our writers, they don't want to use AI to write, right? What they want to do is AI to do their day job so that they can write. AI, like writing is their passion, mm-hmm. and that's what they want to focus on. The things that they want to use AI for are things like the feedback, the personalization, the motivation side of things, I think is really interesting, and the coaching side of things as well, which I think maybe we'll come on to in a little bit when we talk about my book. Mm-hmm. But the field of how we can help writers to finish their books has really opened up. And for me now, our main problem is like, well, which opportunity do we choose? Because there's so many out there, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah, I actually feel bad for you guys. Anybody that has to be in technology, because it's the minute you finally get something developed and out there, it's obsolete in some respects.
Yeah.
And there's always something new. And, you know, I watch some of these thought leaders around, you know, using different tools. And I'm lucky because I can say, you know what, I can wait. Right?
Yeah.
Like I'll just wait till that's, you know, I'll wait for the electric windows to be standard in all cars. Yeah. Right? Like I don't need to go out and get the late. And I think that's the hard part, especially for authors. They feel like they're losing out if they're not chasing whatever that new technology. Certainly, I think you can be afraid of it, or you can also be overwhelmed by it, trying to keep up with it, rather than one of the things we're going to be talking about at the show is this paradigm of like, when you're evaluating things in your business, the things that you're good at and you love to do, right? That's what you want to make that time for. Yeah. Right. So when you're going to apply automation, apply it to the things, first off, that you don't know how to do and you don't want to do. Right. So for a lot of authors on the business side of things, like tracking profit and loss, and that, it's not that they do it bad. They don't do it at all. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's like, if you use automation to do that kind of stuff, then guess what? Now it's almost like you have an MBA working in your business, and you can do it in a way where it's making improvements to your business you wouldn't do otherwise. There might be things that you are good at, but you don't like doing. Yeah. That's another thing that's great to automate, right? But then you do it the way you want it to do it. Your proprietary thinking can be made into some kind of tool, and off it goes, right? And now you got more time to do the writing, right? Yeah. Or to learn stuff that you want to learn. So how, like you mentioned, like the coaching, and how is that kind of manifesting in the tool?
At the moment, it's not, but I'm writing a book, which is then leading into it. So I had this realization, I guess 2 years ago now, where I was talking to a lot of our users, trying to work out how can we help them the most to finish their books. what new features could we add. And this was kind of around, obviously, like the end of COVID and the beginning of like AI going crazy. And what I was hearing was like people were just losing confidence in themselves, and that actually the struggles that they were having, I think probably exacerbated by COVID and isolation, were mostly human problems and psychology problems, and nothing at all to do with craft. And Pro Writing Aid was great at the craft side of things, giving you the feedback, but it's not great at helping you through those difficult human problems. And I was kind of thinking, well, how can I help these people to get through this? And suddenly I was like, well, actually, I know a lot about these problems from my background in psychology, from all the coaching I've done, from building a company.
Yeah.
Like a lot of, a book is a product and a company is building a product. So there's a lot of, and I've been doing that for 13 years. It's like I've been writing one book for 13 years, right? But a lot of the things that helped me as an entrepreneur, a lot of the mindset techniques are actually really applicable to writers, but there's nothing specific out there to help writers. But I had this intuition that it was probably the biggest problem that writers were facing. And so I was like, oh, how can I solve this? And I came up with the idea, well, actually, I can write a book to share a lot of the experiences that I've had, and using ProWritingAid's community and all of the writers that I've talked to over the last 13 years. And now I've done a lot of research as well with those writers to support it. And we're just about to produce a report called The Writer's Mind, where we've done a lot of surveying of writers to show what other writers are doing to help with their mindset and the mental side of writing. I thought, well, I can put all of that together into a book, and hopefully that will really help writers. So I've been working on that for the last 18 months now, just about to go to the publisher. But then the realization is actually we can do a lot in the product with those same things to help writers throughout the process. And so that will be the next phase, is how can we effectively help people at scale with these kind of challenges.
So you said that you did a survey.
Yeah.
So when was that, and how many people? And
so I've actually done several. Okay. So we did one which was kind of a general survey with YouGov, which is a market research agency.
I remember you and Tom talking about that.
Yeah, and then we've done surveys of our users, and James Blatch helped put out a survey, and Joanna Penn put out the survey as well to some of her audience. So we've collected together all of this data on what techniques are people using to help with mindset issues, which ones have they persisted with, what problems are people having. And this really reinforced my intuition that this is the biggest problem. And it was like something like 10% of people said craft was their biggest problem. And the others were, mindset was by far the biggest, and the other was time, which is really a mindset issue as well, a focus issue. So it's been really, really fascinating to then bring that out. And in parallel, I've developed this survey which helps people to identify what I call the writing blocks. So it's the kind of the limiting beliefs that sit behind problems like perfectionism, procrastination, overthinking, idea chasing. So I've got 6 writing blocks, and I've done a survey with nearly 3,000 writers to look at which ones affect the most people. And then the book will cover each of those writing blocks in turn and give techniques and advice drawn from a lot of other writers on how to overcome those blocks. So there's a lot of data that's been pulled into it as well.
What was like the biggest aha for you when you saw that you thought you knew what it was going to be?
Yeah, well, no. To be honest, it was the number of people that struggle with perfectionism. Absolutely blew me away. I was expecting 20, 30%, but it was well over 50% of people said we struggle with perfectionism. So that was the big number that really hit me. just this, and just the scale of the problem as well. I think there was one of the questions is, have you ever seriously considered giving up writing because it's too mentally tough? And I think 34% of people said yes. And the thing that I then thought was, that's the survivors, right? These are people who are still writing. So how many people have given up writing because they found it too tough?
Yeah.
That aren't even in this survey.
Yeah. So interesting you bring that up, because I had a similar experience. I'm got a book about figuring out what your enough is.
Yeah.
And how this whole thing kind of manifested. It initially started off with this research that I've been doing for the last 6 years. And what I found was, from my consulting experience, is with authors that make 6 figures, which is kind of like the holy grail, right?
Yeah.
I make 6 figures. Authors that earn in revenue 6 figures, 36 months from then. So I had to wait 3 years to get this data set, right? 50% of them are still making 6 figures.
Right.
What about the other 50%? Well, 5% are making 7 figures. And the other 45% are earning 5 figures. And a lot of the things that get you to make less money are the things you do trying to make. But the thing that made me think about with that is, like, I know those are like horrible statistics and people are like, boo, I don't want to hear that. But like, those are the people that got to 6 figures. That's got so much survivor bias built into it. That we're not talking about the people that did the exact same thing as the guy that made 6 figures and never made it, right? Because that's the thing, is that you don't hear about all the ones that don't get to that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, to your point of, like, there's so many more people out there that aren't around to fill out the survey because they left. Yeah. They're not in the writer community because
which is, for me, like the saddest thing.
Yeah.
Right. There's the Maya Angelou quote about, there's no greater agony than holding an untold story inside you. And I just think of all those writers who have stopped writing and are holding that agony inside them of the untold story. And for me, that's exactly why I've written this book, because to help those people, right? Because there's so many important stories out there that never get told because people find it too hard to tell that story. And that just breaks my heart. And for me, that is what's motivated this whole book, and that's what's motivating the new direction for ProWritingAid, is helping all of those people, all of the people that never publish, maybe, or publish and then give up because they don't find success straight away, which many writers don't, right? I think talking to Jessica Brody the other day, she was saying her first book, it got rejected by publishers. Many people stop at that point. Many people stop before that point. She's gone on to obviously have incredible success. I want to help more people carry on in the face of rejection and adversity.
Yeah, I think that's also part of the industry selling magic beans, that this is easy and that, it's like some kind of recipe that just hit the bullet points and you're going to be like this person that has had that success. And unfortunately, when you're that survivor, you believe it, right? You're like, I can't believe that that I've been so fortunate. If I could do it, so can you. And it's like, no, statistics say no.
Yeah.
But like, my thing with Author Nation is always, if you've got the bug, if you're crazy enough that this is going to do, like, we understand, because we got that kind of crazy too. Yeah. So come give it a shot. There's no way for you to figure out whether you're going to have the kind of, if financial success is your measuring stick, without writing the book and going through that process. And hopefully we can help you understand that it's not you, it's publishing. Like this is a really hard market. It's not like anything else that like, oh, well, if I just make a functionally better car at a lower price, I will have customers come buy it, right? Yeah. It's like, no, there's, that has to resonate with a certain market. You have to be discovered. And then, there's a whole bunch of things that have to happen after you write the book. It can be really, really discouraging. Yeah. Right. How often do you see posts in the community? It's like, well, I wrote this book and I published it. Now what?
Yeah. Yeah. And lots of people start writing what they start writing for the wrong reasons, right? They see, I can make a lot of money in, I don't know, let's say mafia romance, right? Because it's the big thing currently. And they write a mafia romance even though they don't care about mafia romance. And then it's not a success and they're like, oh, okay, I'll give up. Whereas actually they probably have a story that's much more personal and much closer to what they care about that's inside them, that if they wrote it would probably connect more with people because it's more important to them, but they don't tell it. And if they told that story, that would give them the internal intrinsic motivation to write it. It would give them the intrinsic motivation to carry on, to promote it afterwards. And they probably go on to have a lot more success than if they just chased a certain genre because it's popular right now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of that kind of, it is mindset, right? It's like, well, this is the hot genre. This is what you got to write if you want to make money. And and this is one of these things that people don't fully understand. They're focusing, when they focus on AI, around the ideas of, people using it to produce works. It's not just that, it's how people are going to use it to market. And the more and more that everybody focuses on trying to do more product at more transactions, the real differentiator in my mind is the brand, right? Are you building a brand that people connect their identity to? We were talking in the hall before about, Dungeon Crawler Carl. Those fans have a community and a connection. And it was, you can go back, I think it was 24 that Matt spoke at our show and talked about weaponizing his fan base. And that was, a lot of the stuff that he was saying was like, leave them alone, right? Let them do their thing. And it's like, that's hard when you're trying to make, right? Yeah. Like, well, maybe I just push a little hard on him. I sent him one more email.
Yeah. But I think that's a great example, right? And I was going to mention it as well. I think he's chosen his thing and he's done it incredibly well and he's been rewarded for it. I think you used the word differentiation there. And for me, that's the absolute key, right? In business, 3 most important words: differentiation, differentiation, and differentiation, right? And Joanna Penn, I saw her talk at 20 Books, must have been 3 years ago now. And she said, in the world of AI, the thing you have to do is lean into your weird, right? What makes you different, right? What makes you special? And that's what people want to hear. And that's what will make your writing different. And that's what will connect with people and make them want to buy your books.
Yeah. And I think, you talk about Joanna and, some of the stuff that she has embraced around technology. Some people agree with her, some don't. But the one thing that has been a constant that I've really respected with her is like, she's trying to live her best life.
Yeah.
Right. And that means she's stepping away from a lot of the things that she used to do. And, we're making her money.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's hard. We were talking before we came over here about some of my personal decisions about working with clients. And I grieved over that stuff. I enjoyed what I was doing, but it was like, the times had changed, and if I want to be really good at the thing that I want to be good at now, and I've got to make the space for it,
Yeah.
right? And I think this will resonate with you, is you probably see yourself as a creator, right? Not just in writing the book you're writing now, but like you created software, you created a company, right? There was a culture you created. All that stuff is, it's just a different medium.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's fascinating the parallels between entrepreneurship and being a writer. And I think they're really coming together even more, right? Now, writers are being asked to have an audience before they can even get book deals.
Yeah.
If you're self-publishing, you 100% need an audience, and you need to start building it like last year.
Yeah.
And so the two things really are being pulled together. I mean, Hay House are publishing my book. They actually have a program for their authors called Authorpreneur, to encourage people to have that diversity, to not just write, but think about the marketing side of things and the promotion side of things as well.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're an author that's thinking like, hey, I want to do this for a living, you have to be focusing on those skills.
Yeah.
It is being an authorpreneur. I would argue they've converged a long time ago. The authors that are treating, they say things like, once I started treating my writing like a business, it made a difference. But then the next question is, well, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean? As somebody that, and I think this is true, like when you built ProWritingAid, it wasn't like you were planning on starting a business. You didn't say like, gee, I hope that I'm figuring out how to do tax returns and have an HR department and hiring people.
I made a huge number of mistakes along the way.
Right. But that comes with the business.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like you either have to get help or figure it out. Right. And so that gets to mindset too. Like you can't have one without.
Yeah. I had a fascinating example of what you were talking about, of an author treating it like a business. And she was like really, really struggling to write. And she sat down and she said, okay, if I were a professional writer, what would I do differently to what I'm doing now? And one of the first things that popped into her head would be like, I would invest in myself, right? And I would spend money on myself as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And based on that, she was like, well, that means I need a dedicated place to go and write. And so she invested in an office or like a co-working space that was like 20 minutes drive from where she lived. And then every day she would drive there and she would work there. And it just completely changed everything for her, because suddenly she was behaving like a professional writer, right? And it wasn't just something that she was doing at the kitchen table anymore. It was her profession. She effectively convinced herself that was a professional writer and then became a professional writer.
Yeah, well, that's the part that's so hard, because when you're getting started, you're comparing yourself to the person who's already gotten somewhere, right? So you don't think like, well, what did they do when they were at this point of the trail? Well, like they wrote a bunch of words every day.
I feel like it's like the iceberg problem, almost like you see the success at the tip.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't see all of the failures, the rejection. You just see this beautiful image of what a successful writer looks like. And you haven't seen how much that they failed to get there. And then you fail a few times and you think, oh, I'm not cut out for this. And then you give up. So there is definitely, I think, some normalization of the struggle of writing that has to go on. I think you said earlier, right? People try and sell you this dream of, just write a book and you'll get a publishing deal, or, promote it yourself and it'll be easy. That's so far from the truth, in writing and in setting up a business as well. But we need more stories that normalize it. We need more people who are honest, right? I think there's a tendency for successful people in whatever they do to kind of forget about that, all of the failures, and they gloss over it.
Yeah. So here's one thing I've observed at Author Nation, talking to experienced authors that are there. And I've actually like literally observed it, like been standing there and watching the conversation. Some new author comes up to somebody who's probably a personal hero, and they introduce themselves and they ask, how did you do it? And that person tells them, here's the 6 things I wish I told my, I told my younger self, don't do this, don't. And the person says, well, and it's like, you just got some of the best of, that 20 minutes is a life-changing moment. You're going to go sit in sessions and hear people talk about stuff in a really polished way, which is great. But where the magic happens is when you see somebody that's like, hey, let me show you the scar tissue. I don't do these things. And the person was like, well, yeah, I don't know. And I've had that too, where I remember where I live, there's always people that'll hear what I do and they'll be like, oh, I'm writing a book. And I'll be like, well, you need to start a newsletter. I don't like to do that stuff. And it's like, okay, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go to the public library and set up a table, and like, you're not gonna sell books. This is how people do this. And also like helping them understand, like, when you get started and you launch your book for that first time, understand that all these other authors might be launching that are a lot further ahead of you. So don't think that you're going to go to number 1.
Yeah.
When, you've got all these other people, Andy Weir's launching his book that day. Right.
That's, I think, another difficult thing about writing, right? Is that you're comparing yourselves to all of these people who have years of success ahead of them.
Yeah.
Right. Like if I started playing tennis last week or last year, right, I'm not going to be competing against like Carlos Alcaraz, Yannick Sinner, right, and expecting to be the same as them. But in writing, there's this expectation that you can go from like on your first book and compete at the same level as people who've been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years, which I find intimidating.
Yeah. But also what's really interesting about writing is it's one of the few products where you can kind of put out, this is the wrong word, but I can't think of a better word, like mediocre product, right? Your best effort, and people will buy it and be like, I could maybe work on his grammar. In the middle was really mushy, but like, I like the story, right? Like,
well, Joe, you should have seen the first version of ProWritingAid. It was definitely mediocre.
Yeah.
It was.
Well, but at the time it wasn't. It was, it was.
It was. I have an image of the homepage. It had this kind of like fat professor guy on it, and that I designed myself in Illustrator. I don't know what it really meant, but it was something. And it was very, very mediocre. But it helped people, right? And books often exactly the same, right? Like it might be mediocre in terms of the style and the craft of it. But if the story genuinely helps people, then it's got value. And we shouldn't diss it for being, not grammatically correct or not stylistically incredible. It's still helping people, and that's the main thing.
Yeah, and you can, like, that's how you get better, right? It's the only, like, if you and I used this analogy before, and I started a car company, and we're like, we haven't built a car before. This is our first car. Here it goes. People wouldn't buy it. But your first book, people will buy. And they'll be like, okay, well, you're going to put doors on the car next time, right? Yeah. I like doors. And you're like, yeah. And I understand. Like, I didn't have time for doors this time. And now I understand what. So I think that there's always, I hope that your first book isn't your, like, that's, I say that a lot. But that gets to that whole perfectionism thing, right? Is like, well, no, it's got to be.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, well, what I've observed is a lot of people think that they're only going to ever have one really good idea. And they've had this idea that they've been sitting with for maybe even years, and they become so obsessed with it being such an incredible idea that they never write the story because it has to be unbelievable, the kind of way it's brought to life. And so they put so much pressure on themselves that they never actually produce it. Whereas if you've been working in creative industries for a while, you know that ideas like come quickly. Not all of them will be good, but there's a lot of ideas out there, and they're constantly evolving. The way that you learn is by progress, by putting stuff out there. And I always think of this story about like a master potter who was asked by his apprentice, "Who was your best teacher?" And the potter says, "The kiln." Right? By which he means that every time he puts something into that kiln and gets fired, he learns something from it. He learns whether that piece of pottery was good or bad. But if he never put anything into the kiln, then he would never have found out whether it was good or bad. And for writers, right, that the kiln is publishing or putting something out there, whether that's on social media, whether it's on a Wattpad site, or whether it's actually self-publishing a book.
Yeah, what you made me think about what that story is. I've also heard, I can't remember who told me this, but it was basically a Potter story where half the class, they got to make one
from Art and Fear, I think.
right, and then the other classes make as many as you're going to be judged on quantity, not quality, and the stuff that was aesthetically the best was the stuff that came out of the quantity, not the quality.
Yeah.
The other thing it made me think about specifically with writing is when you think about, you mentioned Wattpad or Royal Road, just posting this stuff. Like Andy Weir got started just writing a story on his website, right? And it was the act of putting it out there over and over and over. And I think that what changes in the author community is they hear about a success story on something like Royal Road, and they're like, "Oh, well, I'm just going to go do that." And they write 30 days worth of stories and nothing happens. They're like, "Well, this doesn't work." And it's like, you forgot the guy that succeeded was writing for 3 years.
Yeah.
And then it popped, right? And why did it pop, right? Like there's a lot of it probably had to do with the quality of the work getting better over time, right? And the people that did read into it it's like the whole thing, like, you just got to get past the first 2 episodes. Then this show gets really good, right? Like, it's like a lot of that stuff's that way on Royal Road, is like when the guy's just getting started. Okay, it's a sunny day and it's a guy, and it's the same stuff that we all start out when we write, but then he gets to that good idea and it starts to develop and he learns, and he's also getting feedback on those sites. People are writing back like, "Dude, this is boring.
Yeah.
Where's the action?"
Well, that's the interesting kind of reframe for the person who says, "Oh, well, I don't want to develop a social media following." It's like, well, actually you can treat it as a way of getting feedback, a way of developing your writing, right? By putting it out there, serializing it, get feedback, iterate, right? Build that audience, and then you can like turn that into a success eventually. I think James Clear is a really good example on the non-fiction side, right? Obviously, Atomic Habits is like 20 million plus books sold. He wasn't an overnight success, right? He was writing his newsletter, his blog for years and years and years, working out exactly what resonated with people, clarifying the ideas, improving them, honing them, making them better, building his audience until suddenly he had this huge success. But there was an awful lot of work that went on behind the scenes to create that.
Well, and you look at some of the, going back to the Royal Road model now, the irony is the beta readers are paying you, right? Because they're your super fans are paying to be in Patreon to get the stuff that you're writing. I know some of those guys that they're live streaming their writing. People are paying to watch them live stream their writing.
Yeah.
On Discord.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Like they'll be a part of their top tier is like, you can get on my Discord and watch me write. I know Dakota Kraut dictates his books live.
Oh really?
Yeah, and like people be commenting and stuff, but like if I remember correctly, this was before the AI thing. People were like, "Oh, he must be using Ghost." Yeah, it's like, if you don't believe me, come watch.
Yeah, oh, that's really cool.
But the whole idea of like, this gets back to something we were talking about earlier, is that experience. It's like, if I really care enough about these stories, especially if it's like a series where I'm into these characters, if I can find out something earlier, or maybe having some influence, right? I know a lot of authors that they get feedback from their community about where they want to, not just like, hey, is the story good? But like, hey, what should the next level of the dungeon be? You know?
Yeah, it's like co-authoring effectively, but at scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some musicians do that, where they ask for the audience to give them kind of the original beats, and then they effectively evolve it from there. It's really incredible, and it's such a great way of taking your audience along with you as well.
Yeah, well, you familiar with the IKEA effect?
Yeah.
So it's that whole idea of like, we build the same piece of IKEA furniture, and I value mine more than yours because I built it. I put something into it. So like, if fans feel that they've put something in there, part of them, and that's like, if you think about what really makes brands take off, it's when the users connect their identity to that. It's BMW, a book, a movie, Star Wars or Star Trek, right? Like it's beyond the story, right? Because we might argue about who, like, what you like of the new Star Wars, the old Star Wars, but we're both Star Wars fans, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, people buy brands because they like bridge a gap between who they are and who they would like to be. So I like Star Wars because it makes me feel like an adventure, right? An intergalactic adventurer that I would love to be in my kind of boyhood heart, but can't be because there's limited astronaut openings out there in the job market at the moment. Right? You buy a Patagonia jacket because you want to be a more conscious consumer, but you struggle to do that in the sort of modern world. You buy like Nike trainers because you want to be more athletic. Right? Every brand that you buy is to kind of make you feel a bit more like you would want to be. And the same with books, right? Like, people buy the books that help them to feel that they are a bit more of the person who they would like to be. You buy like the Hail Mary project, right? Because I want to feel more like MacGyver in space.
Yeah, and I think that's a great one to touch on. I think that the term I heard was hopium. People like, with everything that's crazy that's going on in the world, is like, it's almost not even the story. It's just like, wow, the experience. Like, I sat in that theater and I felt positive and hopeful for 2.5 hours. And I just like saw some really good things that made me feel good. In the end, that's what you're trying to do with a book, right? Is you're trying to bring through an experience, not just narrate a series of it. Even, if it's nonfiction, like the stuff you're doing, you're actually trying to transform them, right? You're trying to get them to a different state faster than if they did it on their own. But even with fiction, it's like you're trying to bring them through some experience, whether it's in outer space or the elves.
And make them feel different, right? And whether that's like more capable or happier or more intellectual or whatever, you're still trying to bring them through a little experience, and the reader should feel changed at the end of your book. And that's the key, I think, with people. They feel like that book has changed them a little bit. And obviously we all have books as well that have changed us in a big way. And I always think of those as like, what would have happened if somebody hadn't written whichever book it is that made me feel so different, like that made me go traveling or changed my worldview. Like what would have happened if they'd given up on that story? And that's a big part of why I do what I do, is that thought of, imagine all of those books out there could have changed my life, have never been written because somebody.
Little slight change. One thing that you guys did this year, like I'm sure you're busy as hell keeping updates on the product and doing that. You decided to take on this big community project of helping people finish their first.
Yep. Well, at least 50,000 words
at least
into it.
Yeah. But we all know from the past experience that those types of initiatives have been really motivating for people.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I got 50,000. Now I can just keep rolling, get the next, 15 to 20. And I know a lot of people, Jamie Davis, who's our show manager, who's been writing for, decade more. That's how he got started was Rimo. But in your situation, now that you've done this, you had Novel November, and then you just had the big contest.
Yeah, Novel Beginnings.
Like, what's coming? I'm interested in that, but I'm also like, you've got 9 months of this under your belt. Like, you want to hit your head against the rock wall, or is this like teaching you anything for the mindset book? Like, kind of unpack it for me.
Yeah. So I think it's teaching us that people really want community. The feedback that we got from Novel November was just unbelievable. The number of people that were energized to start something and then just carried on writing afterwards was incredible. The number of authors that we had involved doing talks and giving advice to people who donated their time for free and their experience for free as well was unbelievable. And the number of stories that came out of it from the audience, I think we had over 60,000 people who took part in it. It was just such a joyous occasion. And for me, like, if you think back to kind of like 13 years ago when I was like getting feedback from like one or two people on forums, like about the product, and that was like a big impact on me. So scale that up to Novel November, it was just one of the best things that we've ever done. And I just absolutely loved it. It was so good to be a part of it. And, we did some sessions at Author Nation in Vegas as part of it. Luckily, they coincided. And just meeting the people and doing write-ins in the Horseshoe in Vegas was incredible, right? I think that's, for me, one of the great things about Author Nation as well, is meeting people like face-to-face as well, people coming up to the stand, talking about the product, giving us feedback, positive and negative.
Yeah.
For me, it's the highlight of my year. And so then to have those two things coincide, last November was just such an incredible time in my life.
Cool. No, we're, I know, because we were just, we've shifted our schedule a bit this year, right? So it's Tuesday through Saturday. I know we've got a 3-hour block planned on that Friday morning for people that want to write. We've got some other stuff set up to coordinate with you guys. There'll be more news on that, but I think that really getting that in real life connection, and whether it's know these people from being online and then you see them for the first time, or the other way where like you get that group and then you stick together from that point forward afterwards and kind of keep each other accountable. I know from, what we're trying to build, accountability we know that gets results, right?
Yeah.
You may be willing to talk yourself out of a situation, but you're like, I'm going to be in a call next week, and I know Chris is going to ask me how many words I got done. So like, I'm going to get them done just so I don't have to have him ride my ass.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and I think just the feeling that everybody else is doing the same thing as you. It goes back to that writing is, it can feel very solitary, or it can feel like you're part of an incredible movement. And for me, that's what Novel November and NaNoWriMo previously did, right? That's why we took it on when Nano collapsed. It was like, this thing has to carry on, right? It's so important to the writing community. It's so important for inspiring people who've been sat with ideas for years and maybe haven't done it, or people who have taken a hiatus from writing and want to come back. It's that kick up the ass that gets them back into writing, and the stories are just unbelievable. So for me, I'm just so happy that we've been able to be a part of that.
One, I don't know, Tom, we did those webinars with Novel Beginnings, and one of the things, we're kind of like, what do you do now you got this book?
Yeah.
Right? That's our thing. We were sharing with Author Nation how we have this Kickstart Together thing that we've done. And we've been running it for we're going into our second year. And, we're explaining to people like, okay, this is what you do. You get your book done, you come over in our community, it's completely free. And we're going to show you how to use Kickstarter to break even on your book the first times, because we know if we keep you at break even, that's a massive success point in you sustaining your career, right? Not just, spending all this money on editing and covers and now you're $3,000 in the hole and you sold 2 copies, right? And you come away with an audience, and it may only be 25.
Yeah.
And you got some money to cover your. And it was funny how many people couldn't believe that, like, there's no cost. It's like what's the gimmick? Like, what? It's like, why are you guys doing this? It's like, because we know if you succeed, then we have customers in the future. We have ticket holders. You've got subscription buyers. And like, it's not, if you want to know what the nefarious thing is, it's like, we know that your success leads to us continuing to be successful.
We succeed when writers succeed, right?
Right? Like, we need successful writers, and this is how it happens. And we know how hard it is. And so, like, on our side of the fence, we can address those things and be like, hey, here's a place, when you do get that book done, you come over here and they're going to show you how to run something that is super complex and have success with it. And I think that, with Novel November, for a lot of people, it's that community, right? It's seeing those other people that are trying as hard as you are. That there's other people trying to get to the finish line.
But it's, for me, I think, especially in self-publishing, it doesn't feel like you're competing against them. It feels like you're all doing it together, which I think is super important, right? Because if a community gets very competitive, then I think it can go a bit negative. But this is one of the things I love about AuthorNation as well, is you just get this overwhelming sense of everybody wanting to help everybody else. You talked about the experienced authors who will tell you exactly like what they wish they'd known, right? And that stuff is hugely valuable, but they will help you with it because they feel a part of the community, and you're AuthorNation, so you're part of their community, and they will share with you. And for me, that's the special thing that you're building at AuthorNation.
Yeah. Well, I had a experience with one author. And it was a pretty big deal, and this guy was getting big, and he was upset he wasn't going to. And I understand that it's important to people. And he's like, well, I'm not even coming to the show. I'm like, and prior to that, it was like, I just want to give back to the community and I just want to help. And you said you wanted to give back to the community and you wanted to help other authors. I said, how did you get help? Was it something you heard on stage, or was it somebody that was ahead of you giving you 25 minutes? He's like, yeah, it was that. And I said, and here's the other thing. I can point to 2 or 3 instances of people that came to our show that hadn't even written a book. And 2 years later, they're a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be the guy that helped them on the way up, because if things aren't going so well for you, you could reach out and say, hey, dude, how about a newsletter share or a blurb for my book? And they'll be like, anything for you, because when, I was nobody, you helped me out. And I think that, to your point about the competition is, I think that within a cohort of authors, there's always that we're swimming together, we're rowing the boat together. And the more that we can help that and remind people like, hey, don't mistake the brutality of the industry for competition.
Yeah.
Right. The difference between ranks on a website like Amazon isn't competition. That's just how the market works, right? Yeah. It's a horrible popularity market. Don't make that, and it's really easy to do. And I think that a lot of the animosity and a lot of the attacks that we see around AI is coming from that fear, and the pain that people are feeling about like, hey, this is a lot. Before we wrap up, I mean, I wanted a couple things, like pulling the novel November thing together with where you are in the book.
Yeah.
Did that change any of your thinking, having seen that?
I think, well, I will admit that my thinking has changed unbelievably since I started writing the book. So that was last January, so 18 months ago that I started. I put together a book proposal, as you do with nonfiction, to try and get a publisher. The book now looks very, very different because I've been wrestling with the ideas and the concepts for 18 months and talking to lots of writers, doing loads of research. And I think the impact that Novel November had on me was, I actually want to apply this to people and see it change them at scale, right? I think a book is great, and like I've developed my thoughts and knowledge and data as well from having done it. But you don't then see necessarily that you've helped people at scale. And it's like, how can I take that and maybe apply it through something? I'm not saying specifically Novel November, but you saw how many people that helped. And so it's like, how can we maybe take the concepts in the book and apply them to a massive cohort of people to produce something incredible, right? 50,000 words at the end of Novel November, but there's still a lot of people that dropped out of that. It's like, those are the people that I want to help, right? And then people struggle in other areas as well. It's like, how can we take the whole community of writers and move them forwards together so that everybody benefits? As you were saying, right? Like, we benefit when writers benefit. For me, the world benefits when writers benefit, because the more stories there are in the world, the more empathy that we have, right? The more that we can read other people's experiences and stories, and the happier the world will be, hopefully. And in this time of uncertainty and chaos, I think that's more important than ever.
Oh, yeah. Well, Chris, why don't you tell folks where they can find your new book? I know that there's a whole launch thing coming, so maybe you just kind of tell them a bit about that and when that's coming out, and then give them the blurb about ProWritingAid.
Nice. Yeah, so the book is called The Writer's Mind. It's coming out April 2027, so next year now. It's on my website that I created last week, chrisbanksauthor.com. But it helps people with the mental side of writing. So the cognitive one, which is the trying to use different brain states at the same time. So the classic is editing and writing, mixing those. But also the identity side of it, like not believing that you're a writer, struggling with perfectionism, overthinking, idea chasing, which has been a massive problem for me in the past, which I had to overcome to focus on ProWriting Aid for 13 years, and all of those problems. And that will be coming out next April. And then ProWriting Aid, ProWritingAid.com. We'll be doing Novel Summer Camp this summer, which is a sort of smaller scale version of Novel November. And then obviously Novel November again in November. But we'll be starting activities in October with Preptober. So you can create a plan for your book. We'll have lots of writers, book coaches, developmental editors giving talks on how to take your idea and turn it into 50,000 words over the course of November, and then hopefully into a published novel in the future. And then maybe they'll come to Reader Nation and sell all their books there.
Yeah, well, or they, the other thing that they should be thinking about is if they're a thriller writer or romance writer, is do they have a short story that they can put into one of our anthologies?
Yeah.
That's the other thing we're doing is maybe it's the first step isn't a full-blown book. It's a good, solid short story, and you do it in an anthology with some other authors and write on some coattails. And
super important, right? Yeah. I think lots of people think I have to write a whole book to start with. You look at Stephen King, right? How many short stories did he write before he then went on to write novels? Short stories are such a good way of like learning and getting feedback.
And not to drag this on, but I'm gonna, one of the things we're doing this year is Andy Weir has provided a short story to be in our graphic novel. And so when it was sent over and I read this short story that was somebody else adapted it.
Yeah.
For our authors, the cool project was we showed them how to turn it into a comic book script that we then handed off to the artist. But in his case, he's a little busy. But to see somebody with the skill set where in 2,500 words he told a story that made me chuckle and kind of surprised me. And then Project Hail Mary, which is, I don't know how, 100,000 words, 250,000 words, whatever it is. Same mind, right? And there's a lot of those short stories that he's been pumping out for years that he just puts up on his website. And you talk about an old website that needs some more. I mean,
do you think he'd be able to afford a web designer now?
I think it's clear that he at some time loved to manage his own website, and he's going to get back to it someday.
Yeah. Well, Taylor Swift manages her own website. I mean, there's such an art to a short story, right? If you read like, the great Russian short story writers like Chekhov, that there's nothing that doesn't move the story forward. Yeah. It's an incredible way of getting feedback and honing your craft. It really is such a good thing to do.
You should see this process.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating, and another medium that you're opening up as well, right?
Yeah, and so Tony Lee, who is a crime writer and mystery writer, he started in comics. He's decades of comic writing, and so he was kind of a coach for folks and explaining to them like how the structure is. And then we have Robert Napton, who's, runs comics at Legendary. He's the editor-in-chief on this thing. And when he told, like, the question from the authors was like, how many words should this be? And he's like, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, as many as you need.
The less is better.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that messed with them. But then the folks that really embraced, like, okay, I get this, the constraint is what is going to drive my creativity.
Yeah.
And to see what's come out of it has been amazing. But it's also, there's been a few points where people have, more than one author, where the email trying to describe something that they want the artist to do is 1,000 words.
Yeah, longer than the story.
Yeah. And Robert's, but brevity is the point in this thing, right? And understanding that, like, how to bring that learning and that constraint into your own writing, and how it could make a novel better when you start saying, well, okay, just like in a comic, I needed to have reveals happen in a certain way, right? How am I doing that in my own writing? Or do I just expound?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's fascinating, like the different mediums, right? Screenplays as well, where you can't do the description, right? And the action has to speak for itself.
Yeah.
And the dialogue really has to stand out. Nothing there to support the dialogue at all.
Right. And going back to comics, when you think about it, the actual number of words might be 100.
Yeah.
That are actually in bubbles.
Yeah. Along
the way. You have to write a script that's helping an artist who's bringing his own creativity to it. So
yeah, well, the Cat in the Hat was written with an extreme constraints, wasn't it? I think. Was it 500 words or something that he was challenged to write with?
Yeah, that was the 500 most common words
in English. Or
something. Yeah. Drew Davis talked about that at last year's show. Really interesting. But yeah, we keep talking. In fact, we will after this. But we should wrap up. We've got some guys.
You've got to enjoy Mallorca.
Yeah. And we got some guys to send home. They're working overtime. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this podcast. And